Okay, we're holding in the middle of a series, the 70 most difficult questions in Judaism. Some questions are more difficult than others. And tonight we'll be doing a mini-series. The following 4 or 5 weeks we'll be talking about zivugim, about soulmates, shidduchim, how that comes about, how come there's so many singles, some tips on how to get married, how to make sure you get the right one, why are people having such a hard time, how to keep your marriage intact, how to stay married, and so forth. Tonight we'll talk more about what a zivug is. What is a soulmate? The topic of tonight is one of those topics that is not very well understood. And unfortunately for many people, they may have certain illusions, certain expectations, certain ideas, and they're wrong. It's important to have the right perspective, the right hashkafa, in order to approach this topic correctly. Rabbis tell us a very, very important point, and really it is one of the most fundamental points in Judaism, and that is Hakol bidei shamayim chutz mirat shamayim. A Jew needs to remember throughout his life that just about everything in his life is conducted from above, it is predestined from before, except for Yirat Shamayim, how one conducts himself, if he's righteous or wicked, if he performs a good deed or not, that is in his hands. In other words, we have free will, and it's through that free will that we can accomplish certain things, but there are certain limitations, and as we've explained in the past, those limitations have to do with one's mazal, or simply that Kadosh Baruch Hu is not interested in giving us the freedom to do how we please, because it may interfere with His plan. After all, Hashem has a plan which we're not always aware of, and that plan, one way or another, has to come about. And if a certain president, prime minister, who thinks he has so much power, wants to do something that is contrary to Hashem's wishes, it's never going to happen. In the end, we must remember that Hakol bidei shamayim, everything is in the hands of heaven. If we do not know this point very clearly from the very start, then we will have a lot of trouble. We will have a lot of anxiety. We will be worried. We will be confused. And we may even make mistakes. So it is important to remember this from the very beginning. Sha'akol bidei shamayim, everything is in the hands of heaven, except, of course, yirat shamayim, when it comes to our own conduct, whether it is ben adam lechavero, ben adam lamakom, whether it is between us and our neighbor, our friends, our family members, or whether it is between us and God. The conduct, how we conduct ourselves, the decisions that we make in those areas that have to do with spirituality, with mitzvot and averot, that, of course, is up to us. But when we make a statement that Hakol bidei shamayim, it also includes zivugim. Zivugim, in other words, matchmaking, who we ultimately marry, that is also in the hands of heaven. And there are various verses, various sayings in Chazal, in the Gemara, in the Midrash, that make this point very, very clear and strong. That it's all in the hands of heaven. What is necessary is for us to have complete bitachon, complete faith, that that is in fact in the hands of heaven. Why did the rabbis tell us that zivugim is bidei shamayim? What's the purpose of telling us that something is in the hands of heaven? What are we going to gain from it if we know that it's in the hands of God? First of all, since it's in the hands of God, He knows what's best for us. We may not know what is best for us. We think we know what's best for us. We think we can make a good decision. We fall in love. We're attracted. Perhaps we should go by these feelings, right? So rabbis tell us, no. Hashem only knows what is best for us. We can never be 100% certain that our decision is the correct decision, if it were really our decision. So therefore Hashem says, you know what? I don't leave it up to you. Most of the time. We will see sometimes He does leave it up to us. But most of the time He cannot leave it up to us. There's a reason why He doesn't want to leave it up to us. This is something too important. The marriage of two individuals, Jews or non-Jews, is a very important investment. This is not something that's going to just take place for 1 month or a year. Hopefully this is for a lifetime. Children will be produced. An entire home is being built. It better be the right couple. It better be the right people that belong with each other for good reason. So it's Hakol B'dei Shamayim, including Zivugim, because this is something very important. Hashem does not want us to make the decision. He knows what's best for us. Mi Hashamayim, Zivugim happens from heaven also because sometimes Hashem wants a certain result to happen, a certain consequence, a certain situation to arise as a result of the combination of two people. In other words, it may not necessarily be the best match, or what we would like to call a good, comfortable match, but since this is Hashem's will that these two people come together, it's also me'ashamayim. So even though we just say something is made in heaven, marriages are made in heaven, that does not mean necessarily that the two people that are going to come together through Hashem's wishes are the best match for getting along with each other. But it's still me'ashamayim. That's another idea of why they tell us that it's me'ashamayim. They also tell us that it's me'ashamayim because since it's in the hands of heaven, it will come about through him. In other words, Hashem, in his ways, only known to him, will make sure that it happens. Therefore, we have nothing to worry about. He will take care of it. He will handle it. It's his job. It's his department. Therefore, what do we get from all of this so far? We got from this that the word zivug, companion, soulmate, could mean two things. It could either mean the one that Hashem wants, not necessarily the one we want, the one we like or enjoy, but the one Hashem wants. Zivug mi'ashamayim. Umezaveg. It did not say he will give you the best one that you like, but it's still his decision. And zivug usually means what we are all more familiar with, the best possible match. The one that we will feel the most comfortable with, the one that will feel the most natural, the one that with time, over the years, we will be more and more convinced that we made the right decision, that we feel good. That is how one knows. And B'ezrat Hashem, next week or in the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about how one identifies who his true soulmate is. How do you recognize him or her? That's a separate topic. I didn't want to mix the two together. It's a very important topic. How do we know? How do we eventually make the decision? Even though it happens from above, he sends us, but he sends us many candidates sometimes. How are we supposed to choose? We'll cover that separately. But it's important to know that the zivug means two things. It's either the one he wants, which may not be our favorite, or the more common one, the true zivug is the one that best complements us, the one that we feel the best with. Why? Because according to the Kabbalah, that individual is from the same shoresh haneshama. It's from the same root of the soul. And because of that, there's a certain affinity. There's a certain closeness. It's like you've lived in the past. Somehow you know that person from before. It's a very good feeling. Rabbis tell us, for those who still have doubts that zivug is min hashamayim, min haTorah, min haNevi'im, min haKetuvim, it is very clear from all three, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, that the zivug is min hashamayim. Min haTorah, this week's parasha. Ki mi'Hashem yatsa hadavar. Lavan, Betuel, everybody together agrees and admits that what happened between Eliezer and Rivka proved that this is the zivug for Yitzchak. For those of you who did not read this week's parasha, Parashat Vayetze, it's a very important parasha in dealing with how zivugim come about. And that is one example that the rabbis used that zivug is min hashamayim because they said, Ki mi Hashem yatsa davar, it came from heaven. Apparently, if it happens so quickly, so easily, based on what you were looking for, that you finally arrived at the relative of your master, Abraham, without even knowing where you were going, obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu led the way. Mikan raya she'azivug min hashamayim. That's min haTorah. Min haNevi'im, from the prophets. What's the raya? What's the proof that zivug is min hashamayim? From Shimshon. The parents of Shimshon did not know, the Pasuk says, Ki me'Hashem hu, that the fact that he was marrying Dalilah, a non-Jewish woman from the Pelishtim, that was min hashamayim. Why was that min hashamayim? Because in the end, it was through that woman that the Pelishtim had their downfall. Min haketuvim, u'me'Hashem isha maskalet, as the Pasuk says, from Hashem comes a woman who's intelligent, a woman who has good qualities and good virtues. So the question is that I have once posed, why do the rabbis want to give us proof from all three? Why from the Torah, from the Nevi'im, and Kektuvim? After all, they're very different. The one from the Nevi'im is proof that this is Zivug min Hashamayim. Hashem did not want Shimshon to marry that non-Jewish girl. So why are the rabbis using that as proof that Zivug min Hashamayim? How do we know that Hashem did not want him to marry the girl? That she was not for him, that she was not his true soulmate? Because there was an incident before he met up with her. He was attacked by a lion. Now we know Shimshon was very strong. We know that he defeated the lion. But why is Hashem sending him a lion? To try to see how strong physically he is, to see if he has the muscles to fight a lion? And we know, after all, that no animal attacks a human being unless the Tselem Elokim has been removed from that individual. The image of God is no longer on the human being. Then an animal will attack. An animal is afraid of a human being. If he attacks a human being, it's only kinidmelo ki be'ema. The rabbis tell us that human being appears in the eyes of the animal like another animal. An animal just doesn't attack another human being. Daniel was thrown into the Gova Arayot, into the lion's den. They didn't touch him. They were hungry lions. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh was thrown into the lion's den in Morocco. The lions didn't touch him. Tzaddikim were thrown into lion's den. They were not touched because they had the Tzelem Elokim on them. Shimshon was a tzaddik. Shimshon was a Nazir, a Kadosh, a holy man. Why is a lion being sent to him? To punish him? To threaten him? To do what? Obviously, there must be a reason. The reason the commentators explain is to remind him that where he is going is not for him. This was supposed to be a remiz min hashamayim to him, that you're going on the wrong road. This is not for you. But he liked her. He was attracted to her. It was because of her physical looks that he basically went after her, and that was a mistake. So the question is, then why is that min hashamayim? The reason why that is min hashamayim is because sometimes bederech shadam rotzeh lalechet molichim oto. The rabbis tell us something very important. In the way that a man chooses to go, they will lead him. They will not necessarily stop you from making a mistake. Sometimes Hashem says, you know what, I can't afford that he make this mistake. This is going to jeopardize my entire plan for him in his mission in this world. I will not allow him to make this mistake. I will not allow him to board a plane. Hashem says that I know that that plane is going to come down. If he's meant to live, if he's meant to survive. Hashem interferes and intercedes in order that his plan is not jeopardized. But sometimes Hashem says, you know what? You're so eager to marry this woman. You like her? Go for it. You're going to fall. You're going to make a big mistake. So the reason why the rabbis use that as an example, that zivug is min hashamayim, is that even the mistakes that Hashem allows to happen, they can only happen because he allows them. It's not that he wants it. This is not proof that this is his soulmate. Zivug min hashamayim, remember what we said before? Is the one that Hashem allows or wants the two to come together, not because this is the true soulmate, but for whatever his reasons are, these two need to come together. In this case of Shimshon, these two did not need to come together, but he chose and Hashem allowed it. So this is an example where one makes a mistake, a very sad mistake, and Hashem allows this mistake to happen. Hashem could have prevented it very easily. The third example of Hashem Isha Maskalet is that even the quality of a woman, of why a certain man marries a certain woman, even the qualities, this woman has certain qualities. Isha tova, matana tova, the rabbis tell us. It's a gift. Behek yirei Elokim tanuach. she will be given in the hands of a God-fearing person. In other words, Hashem does not just give any woman to a good person, He will give him a woman who has the right qualities. So even the qualities of the woman are chosen min hashamayim. To better understand how this all evolves, of why there is a plan in heaven that certain people need to meet, we have to turn to the Zohar, to the Kabbalah, and there it is explained that the soul, the neshama itself, consists of a male and a female part. Just like Chava, the first woman, was created from Adam Rishon, she was taken from him. The animals were created separately, male and female, right? A male tiger, a female tigress, right? The human race was not created separately, a separate man and a separate woman. The woman is taken from the man, and that is because they are really one. In Olam HaNeshamot, in the world of souls, the Zachar and the Nekeva are really part of the same Neshama. The male usually comes down before, and that is why usually the male is older than the female. Usually that's the case. Usually the male is older, and he could be older by a year, by 2 years, by 10 years or more. It depends when he came down. But usually the male comes down before. And that is why they say, Bat Ploni le Ploni. 40 days before the formation of the fetus, it is announced the daughter of so-and-so will marry this man, or this boy that is about to be born. Why do they say the daughter of so-and-so? Why doesn't she have a name? No, she doesn't have a name because she hasn't been born yet. So they say where she will be born, in whose household. But Ploni, li Ploni, to this boy that is about to exit the mother's womb, while he's being formed, he's still in the mother's womb, right? He will marry such and such, the daughter of such and such, because he comes down before she does. Now, these two neshamot that can really are part of the same neshama are the best match for each other. If they ever get together, what will happen? There will be a certain shlemut. Shlemut means that each one will complete itself. Because it's like a puzzle. When you put two pieces that belong together, you have the entire picture. When two individuals that belong with each other come together, the whole picture is made. Now, what's the significance of this puzzle being made? Well, number one, they will be able to have children, Bezrat Hashem. They will be able to involve themselves in the mitzvah of Pru Urvu. And what does that do for them? That will give them continuity in this world. Part of the Shlemut HaAdam is if he leaves behind children. If a person does not leave behind children, rabbis tell us a person who has no children, kemomet, he's like a dead person. One who aborts a child, it's like he's killing a potential life. Rabbis speak very seriously about abortions and those who do not want to have children. That is their continuity. That is what brings shlemut. That is one kind of shlemut. What's the second kind of shlemut? Commentaries explain that the human being, when he's born, he wants everything for himself. A baby comes into this world and wants to grab everything. He has his fists closed. When he leaves this world, his hands are like this. He leaves everything behind. But when you come into this world, the human being is selfish. Adam Rami ne'orav. From the very, very beginning, all children want everything for themselves. Child does not become bar mitzvah, cannot become bar mitzvah until 13. Why 13? Because at 13 is when the Yetzer HaTov enters him, and the Yetzer HaTov introduces the opposite of selfishness. You know what? You can also give and share with others. Why doesn't the Yetzer HaTov arrive a little earlier? It would be nice if he came at the age of 3 or 4, right? Then all children would be nice and caring and giving. Isn't that a good question? Why do we make bar mitzvah at the age 13? Only because the Yetzer HaTov comes at 13? Well, let him come earlier. The Yetzer HaTov cannot come earlier because when a child is 4 or 5 years old, he's not mature. The physical mind, the brains, is not mature. If he had Yetzer HaTov, Yetzer Hara, he'd go crazy. He wouldn't know what to do. He'd be confused. When a child reaches the age of 13, he settles down. He's more mature. He can handle making decisions. Oh, the Yetzer HaTov says this. The Yetzer Hara says this. What should I do? Maybe he's right. Maybe it makes sense, right? He cannot have that conflict too early in his life. So the Yetzer Tov has to come at 13. So who's older? The Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is 13 years older than the Yetzer Tov, so you have a lot of bad habits already ingrained in the child. How are we going to get all those bad habits out? How are we going to get this child, this adolescent, this mature man to become a giver and not a taker? He's going to get married to a woman, and she's going to teach him. She's going to demand it of him, right? And he better do a good job, because if they want to succeed, they're going to have to give to each other. So ultimately, the shlemut that comes about through marriage is the act of giving, not just of taking. Hashem noten, Hashem mashpia. Hashem gives. He wants us to be givers just like Him. This is not only about taking for yourself. Olam chesed yibaneh. The world is built on kindness, on being kind to, on giving, not on taking. The reason why we have so many wars and problems is because people are selfish, materialistic, and takers. They're not givers. So through marriage comes about a very important idea, that man learns how to give. And that, of course, brings about his ultimate shlemut. Therefore, if one is not married, he's missing a great deal. He's only half of his true potential of what he could really be. The true potential, to maximize your potential, a man needs to be married, and hopefully married to the right person. Another kind of shlemut, rabbis tell us, comes about through getting married, is that you will receive, by being married, choma, bracha, v'shalom. Choma means a wall. What kind of a wall do you receive? Choma keneged ha'chataim. Rabbis tell us whoever is not married, whoever is single, sharui belo choma. He has no wall of protection keneged ha'chataim. He can easily sin. One who's married has a wall. He has at least his wife who protects him from going with other women. Some people can unfortunately climb over this wall, unfortunately, and the wall doesn't help them. But that's, that's very, very sad. But the wall is there for a good reason, to protect them from chataim. They have beracha. It's because of one's wife that one has blessing in the house. One is doing well in his parnasah, could be only because of his wife. He thinks he has the PhD. He says he went to college. He thinks he's the smart one. But he doesn't realize that it could be that his entire beracha, the source of blessing, is because of his wife. So the rabbi tells us, be careful not to make your wife cry. Because if your wife cries, if she sheds tears, that can spoil your parnasah. Because she's the source of the parnasah, of the blessing. And then there is shalom. Choma, bracha, v'shalom. What's the shalom? Shalom means peace. What kind of peace? Peace of mind. If one is married, he has peace of mind. Not because his wife is going to iron his shirts, not because she's going to cook for him. That helps too. But the real peace is peace of mind. Shalvat hanefesh, yishuv hada'at, as we call it in Hebrew. That comes about through being married. If a person is alone and single, he's mutrad. He's very, very confused and bothered, and he's not at peace with himself. So there's tremendous benefits to gain by getting married. Now, we talked about shlemut. Shlemut means that one completes himself, one can maximize his ultimate potential. That can only happen, of course, if one has met the right one. If one has met the right one, the other half, that will be his best partner. She will be an ezer kenegdo, as the Torah says. She will be a true helper. They will both have a similar goal, similar values. They will work together, not against each other. And that is how they will complete themselves. So this can only happen, truly happen, if one has his real other half. Now, the rabbis tell us that this other half has been predestined. Nikva mirosh. 40 days before the formation of the fetus. Why do they have to tell us that it's 40 days before the formation of the fetus is already known? So that we should realize that these things are predestined. That there is a reason why an individual will eventually meet up with a certain woman. In other words, there is a certain mission here that has to be accomplished. And even if that other half, that woman, is not necessarily the best match for him, there is a reason why they need to get together. There's a tikkun, something that needs to be accomplished only through the union of these two people. Even though they're not getting along, even though they're not 100% happy with each other, more or less they can live We're not talking about a disastrous situation of abuse and terrible problems. No, that you don't have to suffer them. But there are relationships that are not necessarily very cozy and very, very comfortable, and they're not necessarily for each other 100%, but they were meant to be together. Why? Because Arbaim Yom Kodim Nikva Mirosh. Rabbis are telling us it has already been predestined. There's a reason. People don't just meet. However, there are people who make mistakes, and we're going to get to that soon. But if this zivug is min hashamayim, Rabbi is telling us nikva mirosh, it has been predestined, so that you should know there is a good reason why they're going to come together. They need to accomplish a mission together, even though they're not for each other. Now, so far, what we've covered is predestination. Zivug min hashamayim, zivug that was announced before he was born, a zivug that needs to happen either because they're very much for each other or because they need to live together. They have a mission to accomplish. There's another kind of zivug that is called zivug lefi ma'asav. A mate, a soulmate, that comes into one's life because of one's behavior, because of one's deeds, because of his ma'asim. What does that mean? Because of one's deeds. So let me quote to you a Gemara. The Gemara says there's something called zivug rishon and zivug sheni. A first zivug and a second zivug. What does it mean, zivug rishon, zivug sheni? First and second? Is there third and fourth too? So there's three interpretations of that Gemara. What does it mean, zivug rishon, first soulmate, second soulmate? The simple one, the simple interpretation is what Rashi says. The commentary Rashi says, zivug rishon number one means the right one. Lefi mazalo, the one that really belongs to him. But there's also sometimes a situation where one did not get his real zivug, and he got what's called zivug sheni. The title of a second zivug goes therefore to any other woman who's not his real soulmate. Okay? So it can happen that one will get his zivug sheni and will not have his zivug rishon. In other words, that he will marry a second zivug, one who is not his. And why did that happen? Because the zivug sheni is lefi ma'asav. It's based on his deeds right now. Even though 40 days before the formation of the fetus, when he was still in the mother's womb, and he was not righteous or wicked, because he wasn't born yet, there was somebody predestined for him that was his other half. In the end, when he turns 22, 23, 24, 25, whenever he decides to get married, he's a bum. He's not behaving himself. He's an addict. Who knows what's wrong with him? Do you think they're going to give him that beautiful, nice girl that is righteous and kind? Why mess her up with this bum? He's not behaving himself. So he has to get something lefi ma'asav, according to his present situation, his current status, based on his deeds. And if his deeds are not appropriate, he's going to get one that is not the best match for him. He's zivug sheni. The Kabbalah says zivug rishon, zivug sheni means something completely different. Not that the Kabbalah disagrees with these two terms that I said before, but they have an additional interpretation of what zivug rishon and zivug sheni is. Zivug rishon means the first time you come down into this world. Zivug sheni means anytime you're reincarnated. Begilgul sheni. Gilgul shlishi. Second, third, fourth, you've been coming down into this world several times. Usually, most of the time, one will not get his wife from a previous lifetime the next time around. Just because the man has to come down for another trip, for another life, it does not mean that he gets to take his wife from his previous lifetime. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So according to the Kabbalah, zivug sheni therefore means the zivug that one will get because of his ma'asim, depending on how good of a person he is, based on the reincarnation that he's in. So sheni means what? Second or third reincarnation.
So if he's good, then
if he's a good person now,
his original wife back?
Sometimes.
If he's good in his last life?
If he was really good, then he's able to bring his wife from the previous lifetime. But not everybody gets that. Only Hashem knows who does. No. Usually, zivug sheni, according to this interpretation, means that because this is a gilgul means that you're here reincarnated because of some tikkun that you have to perform that you did not finish or do correctly in the previous lifetime. Therefore, you're not going to get the exact same one. But you're still going to get the best and closest match, the one that's from the same root of your soul, which is, of course, something good, but not the original one. So Zivug Sheni will depend on what? It will depend on the Maasim. Then there's a third interpretation, which is very simple, and that is Zivug Rishon is your first marriage, Zivug Sheni is your second marriage. No. What's a second marriage? Widow. In other words, could be your wife passed away. If one's wife passed away and he remarries, then the second wife could be a Zivug Sheni. But that's not always so. That's not always so. Why? Because Zivug Sheni, according to this interpretation, all it means is the second time around. The second relationship. The second relationship does not necessarily mean it's bad. It's just a second wife or third wife. Many people have a successful second marriage that's sometimes better than the first. I'm sure many of you have seen that or heard about it. That sometimes people do better the second time around. What does that mean? It could be that the first one was not his real one. And finally he did teshuvah, or he did something right, and he was able to get his real second half the second time around. So Zivug Sheni being lefi ma'asav, being that the second one is always according to his deeds, he may be able to get his real other half just in case the first time around he did not get it. Or it could be that just the second woman, at the age of 95, he wants some company, and they give him some woman, who's willing to marry a 95-year-old man, So that will be a second zivug for him. Now, it is possible, however, that each one of his wives will be his real zivug. How do we know? It all depends if they have children together or not. It depends on how many years they live together. And this is a very sensitive topic. Why is it a sensitive topic? Because what does a woman do who was married twice? Or what does a man do who was married twice? Who should he be buried next to? Who should he be buried? His mother? Yes, that may be a compromise, huh? Yeah. Isn't that an interesting question? A man got married twice, a woman got married twice. Who should she be buried with? This is it. It's brought down in the halakha. What if there are children from both, and some children want this one, some children want that one? It depends on several things. Well, let's find out who the true soulmate is. Well, they're both possibly soulmates. They both have children. And even if they're not, even if there are no children, if they lived many years together, what if they lived more years together, the second marriage than the first, even though the first she had children? Right? There's all sorts of combinations. And we don't really know who the real zivug is, and sometimes they both could be real zivugim. And this may not sound fair to the women, but that's the halakha, that technically a man is allowed to have up to 4 wives. Not today, except for Salt Lake City, maybe. Right? Yeah, not today, but they won't allow it in this country. And some men I know feel very, very sad about that. It's not possible. And some men cannot even handle 1. I don't know what they would do if they had 4. So it's a good thing. Rabbeinu Gershom, who lived about 1,000 years ago, said, 1 wife at a time is enough. 2 is too much. You're going to have trouble. And I think the women were very happy about that. Yeah. Yeah. No. Not only Yaakov. Others have had 3, 4. Yeah. No. Up to 4. As long as you can support them. So anyway, so technically, a man who can support 4 wives, he can have 4 wives. It's possible. A woman can only have 1 man at a time because she's the vessel that carries the children. The moment the husband puts the ring into her finger, they create a certain channel that cannot be broken, through that channel, all the souls that are going to come down, the children, are going to go through that channel. If she goes to another man, she's creating a short circuit, ketzer, and that's what produces a mamzer, a bastard. A woman, therefore, that she carries the children. She's the one, the vessel that receives the soul. She cannot be married to 2. I mean, you can only be married to 1. She can only receive. You can only have 1 channel. A man can, of course, have more than 1, technically. He's the one that gives. He's not the one that receives the souls. So therefore, it's possible for him to produce neshamot, to bring down neshamot in other women. But anyway, obviously today it's not relevant. But the point here is that man can be married more than once, and it could have two wonderful, good marriages. What will it depend on? If they're both good marriages, on his ma'asim. Because the second time around, even if it's the real one, will still depend on how his ma'asim are. Is he meritorious now or not? Yeah. What do you mean if he's married? She could also be his zivug. There are great rabbis, tzaddikim, who were married 3 times. The Bet Yosef himself, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, was married 3 times. And each one of those women, of course, were very special women.
His wife passed away?
Yeah. He lived to 87. He outlived them all, from what I recall. I think even the last one, yeah.
I heard that even if she dies, the first one, she could also be the horaya that they were married.
Oh, yes.
And they must have been
If they got along well, yeah. They could, even though it did not last long, it could still have been his true zivug. That's true, yeah. Anyway, so we spoke about why did the rabbis tell us it's predestined. It's predestined to remind us that it comes from above. However, they also tell us that it's predestined, that it's possible to change. In other words, even though it's predestined, one is capable of changing it for the good or for the better. For the good, if he got stuck with something no good, he can pray that he should not live, in other words, he should not have to go along with it. The best proof of that, anybody know, is where do we find a case in the Torah, in the Midrash, that one knew she was getting a terrible person for a soulmate, and she prayed, I don't want, this week's parasha, Leah. It's predestined. Esav, they told her, all the rumors were, Esav is your zivug. She prays to Hashem, and Hashem says, okay, no problem.
That's because she had 6 boys already. She was afraid that she'd have descendants, and it wouldn't be fair to Rachel.
That's a separate thing. We're talking about right now the marriage to Yaakov. She did not want to marry Esav. She prayed to Hashem. What does Hashem do? Fine, you get Yaakov. Not only do you get Yaakov, but I have some news to tell you. Leah, you know, because you prayed to me, you're also going to have children before Rachel. So the prayer of Leah accomplished 2 things. It canceled the terrible decree of marrying Esav. I mean, everybody knew he had a bad reputation. Plus, her prayer allowed her to have children almost right away. Whereas Leah had to wait, Rachel had to wait a little bit longer. Anyway, the fact that something is min hashamayim also reminds us that one can pray, basically. If things are not going well, just turn to him. That is why the rabbis continuously remind us. Oh, remember, this is min hashamayim. Just turn to him. That's all. Okay, if everything is min hashamayim, then why do the rabbis tell us another very important point? When it comes to zivugim, kashe lezadgam ki kriyat yamsuf. There's all sorts of difficulties involved. It's so difficult to pair them up, like the splitting of the Red Sea. So the Zohar says, wait a minute, nothing is difficult for Hashem to do. Why are the rabbis telling us that this is as difficult as splitting the Red Sea? Is anything difficult for him? Nothing is difficult for him. So the Zohar's interpretation of that Gemara is because there are kitrugim, there are accusations sometimes on people. There are accusations that Hashem has to deal with. Midat hadin, the attribute of justice, has to hear accusations. This man is not behaving himself. This man is hanging around and doing things that he should not be doing. And because of that, why should we give him the best choice? We're going to give him 2nd class, 3rd class. We're not going to give him 1st class. So, kasher lezadgam ki kriyat yamsuf means what? That there are accusations, and therefore it's not going to be a smooth transition from single to married. Just, you're going to find her right away, you're going to know right away, and it's just going to both decide on getting married. No, there are going to be a lot of hassles. Because according to this interpretation, it's because of the kitrugim, because of the accusations. Especially if we're talking about if somebody's here in a gilgul, in a reincarnation. Reincarnation means that he has tikkunim. If he has tikkunim, in other words, it's something for him to repair, those can hinder, those could be a hindrance, a problem, an obstacle in the way. What's another difficulty? What other difficulties are there? According to Rashi, remember Rashi said, Zivug Sheni is lefi ma'asav. Zivug Sheni, they don't get along with well. One does not get along well with the one that is not hit for him. The Kashele Zavgan Kriyat Yamsut that the rabbis meant that it's difficult, it was only meant for the second one. The one that is not his. The first one should not be difficult at all. Smooth relationship. Barely any arguments. Right? Something of a rare commodity today, right? No arguments, everything's smooth, they agree just about on everything. Zivug Shani is a problem. So Kriyat Yamsuf, one interpretation is either because of the accusations or because they just are not for each other. Then there's a third interpretation. You have an individual whose name is, let's call him Yaakov. Yaakov did not marry the first time around his real zivug. Why? Because remember we said before, he made a mistake, or he did not behave himself. He ended up marrying somebody that's not for him. And they ended up eventually getting divorced. This Yaakov became a Baal Teshuvah. He did Teshuvah. And as a result of his doing good Teshuvah, Hashem says, you know what, I'm going to give you now your real soulmate. That soulmate of his has been married to someone else in the meantime. What needs to happen? That woman's husband is going to pass away. That woman's husband is going to leave this world, or they're going to get divorced. What? Why? Because Hashem says it's time now for me to bring Leah to Yaakov. The time has arrived. So I have to separate the first couple. And because Hashem needs to separate another couple, that is difficult for him to do. This also is mentioned in the Zohar as another difficulty that sometimes occurs as a result of people changing for the better in life. And now Hashem says, okay, I've got to give you the right one now. So anyway, all of this produces all sorts of difficulties. But there's one more difficulty that I want to talk about, and that is difficulties that occur prior to the engagement, or during the engagement prior to the marriage. Arguments, fights about money, about all sorts of problems. As the rabbis tell us, En k'tuva de lo ramya le'a tigra. There's no k'tuva, there's no settlement of the relationship, in other words, that they both come to an agreement without some sort of argument. About all sorts of things. Who pays for this? How much you want? This. No agreement. Especially in certain communities that I don't want to mention. There's always this fights about money. But anyway, I have some interesting news to tell you. I have some interesting news to tell you about fights and arguments. Some of those fights and arguments are very good and positive because they produce what Hashem wanted it to produce, that the two will never marry. Because there was an argument, because there was a fight about something trivial, the boy says, forget it, or the girl's parents say, forget it, we don't want it. And everybody feels so bad. The two were they sent out invitations. And all of a sudden, I'm sure you heard of stories like this. Invitations are sent out, and they broke up, or something happened. Everybody's upset, disappointed. Hashem says, wait a minute, that's what I wanted to happen. They were never meant to get married to begin with. Then why did it have to happen through a fight, through an argument, through machloket? Hashem knows. Hashem decided that their breaking up has to happen this way, or that way. We don't know why, but they have to break up. When? Only if it's something trivial. You know what? I changed my mind. She's not exactly what I'm looking for, or he's not exactly what I always wanted. Something trivial. If it's a major fight, that's a whole different story. If it's a major fight, it could be that they are undoing something which is potentially good. Because remember, many times people have to go through all sorts of tribulations, all sorts of painful situations, embarrassing situations because of a tikkun of a previous gilgul. And that is why there's a machloket. But many times the parents or the in-laws get involved and they destroy an otherwise potentially good shidduch. When do we know that this is the case? You can't always know that. When the problems continue, persisting later in life. Mother-in-law doesn't like her daughter-in-law. There's always problems, even though that is typical. Mother-in-law, daughter-in-law. But sometimes there's so much machloket that even a good relationship can self-destruct. Parents have to be very careful not to get too involved, because sometimes, because of their involvement, they can destroy a good relationship. But many times, if it's before the marriage, the breakup because of a machloket or a problem is usually for the good. Better that they broke up before and not afterwards. And that is Hashem's way of making sure that it doesn't happen. Therefore, if something happens that is trivial, something small, something insignificant, nobody should feel bad. It was meant to be. Broken engagement, it was never meant to happen. Now, some people have this idea that the reason why they're not getting married is because they lack a degree. Or sometimes I've heard it from certain people, they went on a date and they feel terrible. You know what, I should have dressed up like this. I should have worn this sweater. I shouldn't have worn this. I shouldn't have said what I said. It ruined it for me. I'm sure it sounds familiar to some of you. Shtuyot. It's a bunch of nonsense. You cannot ruin what Hashem prepared by making a small little mistake like that. We're not talking about a major mistake again. The small little mistakes, like I didn't dress right or I said something. Shtuyot, we call it in Hebrew. Nonsense. It's not true. Hashem has a plan, and you think by saying the wrong thing or by wearing the wrong sweater, the wrong colors, you're going to ruin the plan. It's going to happen anyway. And I'm going to tell you a few stories that prove this point, that there's very little you can do to interfere with the plan. It has to be a tremendous, terrible act, terrible deed. It has to be that the person is misbehaving himself in a terrible way. And we'll be talking about that next week. Next week, B'ezrat Hashem B'li Neder, we'll be talking about why there are so many singles. After all, we're just talking about how Hashem is managing the world, and He does a great job. So where are all the zivugim that are not happening? Okay? Some tips on how to get married, and then later, how to identify your zivug. So that's a very important topic that we need to cover separately. But right now, I want to prove to you, through the following stories, that for making trivial mistakes, for not getting a degree, for just, not doing things 100% properly, you will not lose your zivug. There was a story that I've told before. Many of you who were here when I gave a lecture, a series about interpersonal relationships, 14 lectures about the various kinds of relationships, husband and wife. And the series is available online at EnglishTorahTapes.com. All 14, husband and wife, and it covers astrology a little bit, and parent and children, neighbors and friends, and it covers the entire gamut of relationships with husband and wife, including those who are about to get divorced. It's a very important series. So some of the ideas may sound familiar to you, some stories may sound familiar to you. Nevertheless, it's important for me to repeat them. There was one case where there was an individual who had a terrible neighbor. Every time a shidduch came up for him, that neighbor ruined it for him. He went over to the matchmaker and says, this guy is a terrible guy. He's not an honest person. He just bad-mouthed him. So the single man went over to the Chazonish, the Tzaddik Levachak, for the Rav. The guy is ruining all my shidduchim. Everything that comes his way, people ask, the neighbor then, he's ruining everything from me. He says, don't worry, all the shidduchim that he ruined for you were not meant for you. When the real one comes, he'll be out of town. Or he'll just keep his mouth shut for whatever reason. If it's meant to happen, don't worry. The real one, nobody will interfere. But one who does not have bitachon, he thinks, somebody's ruining it for me. Nobody can ruin it for you. If it's meant to happen, it's going to happen. There's another story that I'll briefly go over, even though it's a longer story of how it came to be, of a girl that was born with a large stain on her face. A large stain that was visible, somewhat of a reddish stain, not very appealing. And she was having a very hard time. As soon as she went out on the first date, there was no second date. The boys didn't want to go out again. And you can imagine her neighbors, her friends, her parents feeling sad for her. But sure enough, one time, somehow, of course everything's min hashamayim, there was somebody in the house where she was, and they started talking. They went out, And eventually they got married. And they asked the boy, well, wait a minute. Didn't you notice when you first saw her that she had a big stain? No, I never noticed it. And by the way, now that I see it, it doesn't even bother me. You see? The real zivug will not notice it, and even if he does notice it, it won't bother him, because everyone has a zivug. But my favorite story is the story with the Rashash. Rashash was a rabbi who lived in the early mid-1800s, great rabbi who wrote a very important commentary to the Talmud. He's a rabbi of a town, very important, respectable person. He used to lend people money. He used to have a gemach. And he was very organized. Every time he lent money, he had a little book where he wrote down the name, the amount, the day that it was taken, and the day when it was repaid. So the tailor of the town came to borrow some money. Rabbi gave him the money, wrote down his name, and the man left. Tailor came back after 3 weeks to pay the loan. The rabbi was very busy, engrossed in a sugya, in a certain part of the Talmud, difficult part of the Talmud. And he basically took the money and put it in the back of the book that he was reading, inside. And he, of course, as a result of just putting the money in, did not write the man's name down because he was so busy, he just took the money. Tailor went home. A couple weeks later, time passes. Rabbi calls the tailor, where's the money I lent you? Rabbi, I paid it. I gave you the money. I don't remember. I have good records. I'm a good bookkeeper. I didn't write down your name. That means you never paid me. But Rabbi, I'm telling you, I was there. You don't remember I came in? No, I don't remember. If I would have seen you, I would have written it down. So they had an argument. What do you do when two Jews have an argument? You go to Bet Din. Whatever Bet Din says. Yeah. So they go to Bet Din, to the court. And what does the court do? Listen, the rabbi is an honest person. He claims you owe him money. You don't have a receipt that you paid. So the only thing we can do is ask you to swear. And according to the halakha, if you swear that you paid, then you're exempt. You prepared to swear? Yes, Rabbi, I'm prepared to swear. As soon as the rabbi heard that this man is prepared to swear in his eyes falsely, he says, oh, no, I'd rather him not swear, God forbid, falsely. I'd rather let go of the money. I forgive him. That's it. I don't want him to swear falsely. The word spread, unfortunately. Machloket spreads like fire. And people found out. The tailor got a terrible reputation as a result of this, how he went against the rabbi. He was an ungrateful person, did not return the money. He was prepared to swear falsely. So in shul, they did not give him any more aliyot. He was not given the respect that he had before. And of course, the whole town was against him. As a result of the whole town being against him, he had to move out of town, further away, and do business only with non-Jews, because nobody even wanted to do business with this dishonest tailor. One day the rabbi is sitting down, learning from that same book, turns over some pages, and he finds the bundle of money. And he caught himself. He says, oh, how terrible. I just realized what happened. How terrible of me to have accused somebody falsely. What do I do now? So he went over to the tailor. He found out that the guy had to move out of town. He felt terrible. He says, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I found out that you really gave me the money. I just didn't realize it. He says, Rabbi, it's already too late. You ruined my reputation. I don't have parnassah. My livelihood is ruined. What good is it that you asked for my forgiveness? Look what you did to me. Don't worry, come back to town. You'll get your job back. You'll get your position back. He says, yeah, but what's that going to help? People still will disrespect me. People still will look down at me. No, I'm going to get up in shul and I'm going to make an announcement that it was my fault. It was my mistake, that you are righteous. He says, Rabbi, they're not going to believe you. They're going to think that you have pity on me. And that is why you're saying what you're saying, but it's not the truth, So the rabbi says, you know what, you got a point. Yeah, you got a point. So what can we do? So the rabbi says, I have a great idea. I have a young daughter and you have a young son. Let's make a match between them. And if the rabbi's daughter marries the tailor's son, well, people are going to for sure believe that you are a big tzaddik if you can marry the rabbi's son. Rabbi, if you do that, I 100% will accept your forgiveness. If you do that. And of course, that is exactly what happened, and the tailor came back, and they lived happily ever after. Now, what's the point of the story? This would never have happened ordinarily had the rabbi not misplaced the money. Had this incident not happened, would the rabbi think of giving his daughter to the son of the tailor? I mean, it can only be because Shamayim, they are the zivug. So Hashem takes care of it. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to do it. And that is why it happened the way it happened. A classic example that zivug is min Hashamayim. Anybody, therefore, who blames himself or herself for something that they did wrong, they didn't dress right, they said something, they lack a degree, there is no parnasah, it's all heresy. I like to call it apikorsut. It's not right to talk like that. Anybody who says that he has a fault, he has a problem, it's impossible. It's not right to say like that. In Yiddish, there's a saying, Asis bashert is men blind. If something is decreed from above, then we are blind. We will not see the faults, we will not see the problems, we will not notice what others would notice, because it's bashert. It has been predestined from before. So therefore, it's not correct. It's not right for a person to have any doubts or any regrets that he did something wrong. Okay, so how does the zivugim come about? I just shared with you a story, an incredible story of how it came about. But basically, in general, the way zivugim come about, rabbis tell us, Arbe shlichim lamakom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has many, many messengers. A zivug can come about through a neighbor, suggesting, through a friend, mutual friend, through a relative, through a matchmaker. It can happen in many, many ways. Rabbi tells, Yesh shebale zivugov, yesh zivugo ba'elav. Rivka came to Yitzchak, Yaakov has to go to Rachel and Leah. Zivugim come about in different ways. You could meet her in the street. Let me tell you a quick story. There was a girl from Tunisia that went to seminary in, I think, London. She got sick there. Nobody knew what the illness was that she had. She went back home, and as soon as she got back home, this illness went away. She went back again to London, became sick. The doctors couldn't figure out every time that she comes to London, what is it? Anyway, when she was back home, one of her sisters, she had a sister, I think, in Toronto, told her, why don't you come for Pesach to Toronto? Like this, you'll be, calmer. Hopefully your problems will go away, whatever you had before. Spend some time with us. So she already had bought a ticket to Toronto. In the meantime, her brother calls her from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Why don't you come to South America? Toronto in the winter, Pesach, it's still a little bit cold. Maybe you want to be in a sunnier place. In the end, she changed her ticket, and she went to Brazil. In Brazil, at that time, was a young man who was about to go back to yeshiva, I think, in Israel. But he stayed one extra week because there was a askara, a memorial for one of the relatives. So he decided to extend his trip by one more week. During that one extra week, the two of them met and got married. Basically, you see how this one was in Tunisia, this one is in Brazil, from Israel. They are supposed to meet. They're going to meet one way or another. One is from New Zealand and one is from Alaska. They're going to meet in Jamaica. Somehow it's going to happen. Yeah, somehow. If it's meant to be, they both went to a conference. The conference happens to be in Kingston, Jamaica, whatever. Hashem put it into their mind to go on the same cruise, on the same trip, and that's how it happens. So zivugim can happen in many, many ways. Okay, so now we've come to one of the last points. We talked about how everything happens min hashamayim, but nonetheless, people have ruined it for themselves. And we're going to talk a little bit about that more next week, but I'll tell you briefly that a person can ruin it for himself, can push it off. He can decide he doesn't want to get married. What are you going to do then? People don't, he's not interested. He sees that his parents got divorced, chas v'shalom. I've heard of this case. Parents are divorced, I don't want to get married. I don't want to go through what my parents went through, chas v'shalom. That's what he says. People, have different kinds of circumstances, and they either postpone it, right, or don't want to, and eventually they can ruin it for themselves. In that case, sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to intercede, somehow to push the individual, somehow to bring it about in a different way, that he would agree, or he lets him do as he wishes. And that is an example of where a person can ruin it for himself. In other words, even though it was meant to happen, Hashem does not always push it too hard. You don't want it, I'm not going to bring it to you, and somebody else is going to take it. If everything is predestined, then why do the rabbis tell us that a person should be prepared to spend as much money as necessary to marry a bat shel talmid chacham, a daughter of a respectable individual who's learned, and to marry off his daughter to a talmid chacham? Why should we choose these particular individuals? Not everybody ends up marrying a talmid chacham. So why did the rabbis tell us to choose these? All they were doing by telling us that is, even though not everybody ends up marrying a talmid chacham or his daughter marrying a talmid chacham, the rabbis wanted us to focus on good things. Don't focus on money. Don't focus on beauty, because money comes and money goes. There have been many stories in Eastern Europe of a father-in-law promising his son-in-law, you know what, you'll be able to sit al cheshboni, learn for the following 10 years. And what was the father's source of income? He had a big forest. Lumber, and the whole forest burned down. Have you heard of these kind of stories? Well, they had one in Malibu recently, right? San Diego County, fires. All the money, all the dreams go down. Now what is he going to do? He's stuck with a girl that he only married because of her money. Beauty, after the first or second pregnancy, she gains weight. She doesn't look as beautiful anymore. Now what are you going to do? Not every woman retains the beauty for all the years. So you only married her for the beauty? Now you're stuck. So rabbis tell us it's not a good idea to look at money or beauty. Focus on values, focus on midot, focus on yirat shamayim. These are the things that are going to go over to the genes. And we'll talk a little bit more about it next week, what to look for. What does one do who lost his zivug?
You go through the genes, yirat shamayim comes.
No, midot, certain midot. Certain good characteristics. What does one do who lost his zivug? He's already in the 42, 43, and apparently she's not waiting around, and apparently she's not around. I mean, what does he do? He was told by Mekubal, your zivug is married to someone else. What should he do? Should he give up hope that this should not get married? The rabbis tell us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a special otzar, storage of individuals who are perfectly suited for this individual who lost his zivug. You know who they are? Garush, a divorcee, a widow. They're available. You can marry them too. Okay? Number 3, there is a certain girl out there that her real soulmate just did not want her because she was a little bit too short for him, but she's a great girl, and she's around. That guy messed up. So she's around. She's 38, 39. Perfectly good woman, right? Good candidate for you. So we have that. Then we have one who made a terrible mistake and went after a woman because of her money or her beauty. And of course, his real zivug is still waiting. Right? Or the picky, somebody who was very, very picky. You have quite a few people out there who, because of their decision or because of their situation, their real spouse is still sitting around somewhere. And Hashem says, you know what? They are available. And I'm going to give them to the best possible match. So even though one may no longer have his zivug, even though he can still get it, he should not give up hope because there is a second close match that may be out there that was either a divorcee or a widow or somebody that was just left behind because somebody was too picky or just did not take her. Rabbis tell us that even balei mumim, even those who have physical defects, disabilities, problems, asthma, whatever you want, problems, they don't look nice, they're not appealing, attractive, even they have a zivug. עד כדי כך, the Rebbe tells שאפילו ממזר בקצה העולם, בסוף העולם, a ממזר, הקדוש ברוך הוא מזווג לו ממזרת. הקדוש ברוך הוא brings him a ממזרת. In other words, a ממזר, a bastard, cannot just marry anyone. Even somebody like that, the lowest of the lowest, the greatest mum of all, he's a mamzer, a bastard. Even if he's in the end of the world, in Hong Kong, right? And this other one is in L.A. Chas v'shalom, in L.A. there should be mamzerim, but anyway. Hashem brings them together, even mamzerim. Anyway, what does all this tell us? All this shows us that in the same way that one's neshama, one's soul, directs him to where he needs to go, to what he needs to accomplish, to what his mission needs to be, in the same way one's soul is directed to his ultimate soulmate, to somehow find the right match. As long as what? As long as he doesn't interfere with Hashem's job. As long as he doesn't disturb. As long as he doesn't create problems, everything will work out and he will find the right soulmate. A person has to, of course, pray to Hashem that there should be no accusations, that nothing should interfere, that it should be smooth, that nobody should ruin it. And of course, one has to have, along this way, tremendous amount of bitachon, tremendous amount of faith in God, that everything is from above. And as we will see next week, and next week is very, very important, if you do the right things, there's no reason for you to worry that you will not find the right one. It's just that some people's zivug comes about at a later age. Today's generation is very different than the generation of 50 years ago. And even though it's next week's topic, I'm just going to tell you, for those of you who may not come here, that this is, the Kabbalists of this generation say that this is a generation of tikkunim. A lot of reincarnations, a lot of people who have to go through all sorts of difficult trials, because this is a generation of tikkunim. So therefore, that's why we're having a lot of problems. But that does not explain why there are so many singles, but that is one of the explanations of why we're having so much trouble and difficulties in getting the marriage consummated at 20, 21, 22, 23, the way it used to be all along. By Hasidim, it works incredible. The boy and girl don't barely go out. They go out once, twice, that's it. The parents already decided between themselves. And you wonder, how could the parents decide? Hashem uses every family, every situation, Hashem uses that to bring about the zivug. If one family or families, the parents are the ones that are going to make the decision or help make the decision, that he puts it into their head who to think of. If another young man or young girl, if their way of deciding is through feeling of chemistry, then Hashem is going to say, you know what? You're going to know who your soulmate is by feeling if there is chemistry or not. If another couple way of figuring it out is by just looking at certain qualities, then it's going to happen by that individual having those qualities. In other words, the zivug will happen one way or another, but it does not happen the same with everyone, because everyone is different. Everybody has different criteria of what they're looking for. And Hashem says, well, I have to use their criteria to bring it about. So the important thing for those of you who are still single is to not lose hope and to pray to Hashem and remember that it's all in His hands. Thank you very much.